Hello, my name is Sarah Holland. Welcome to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Each week on the podcast, we'll explore how your mind can help you create a meaningful and happy life. And through the conversations here, we'll be planting seeds of inspiration to bring you more clarity, purpose, and joy. This podcast is for you if you've ever felt stuck or unsatisfied with life and know that you want to live in a bigger and more beautiful way. I hope you enjoy the time you spend with us. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to the Fertile Mindset podcast. We are a few weeks in now to this new look for the podcast, where I moved away from solely focusing on fertility towards episodes and conversations that explore living meaningful and happy lives and touch on the topics of clarity, purpose, and joy, which is the foundation of all the support I offer at Fertile Mindset. And of course, at the end of each episode, I ask my guest, what brings them joy? And I love the varied answers that we're getting. Now, I'd love to know what you think of the podcast so far and how you're enjoying the episodes. Your thoughts and feedback are always welcome, and you can contact me via my website at fertilemindset.com. And I'd also really appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts if you'd like to spend a couple of minutes writing one. These reviews help the podcast reach more people, so thank you so much for taking the time to write one. Now, today I'm welcoming Rosie Hill onto the podcast as we talk about her life and business that is focused on nature. I loved having this conversation with Rosie after we first met at one of her day retreats, which was a birthday present from my husband. I wasn't sure what to expect and I was a little nervous going on my own, but as soon as I arrived and saw the beautiful setting that Rosie had created, I knew it would be a special day. And this conversation with Rosie is very special too. But first, I'll introduce her to you. So, Rosie is the co-founder of Wild Ivy Retreats, a sanctuary dedicated to fostering community and nurturing a deeper sense of self through meaningful connections with nature. Their retreats and events offer guided meditations, foraging experiences, nourishing food, creative workshops, and a strong sense of community. Rosie is passionate about helping people find stillness and creating space for their minds to rest, guiding them on a journey to inner peace and rejuvenation. And I must say that description is entirely accurate for the retreat that Rosie created that I attended. I loved hearing more about Rosie's story, how she came to create Wild Ivy Retreats, and what this work means to her. I hope you enjoy listening to, and it inspires you to not only get out in nature yourself, but also to notice what lights you up and consider how you can follow your own passions too. Hello, Rosie. Really lovely to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I mean, we only met, a couple of weeks ago at the most, a week and a half ago, when I came on your wonderful retreat. Wonderful retreat that was such a break from my everyday life. Was a really special time. And as I've seen how you live your life and how this business is a big part of your life, and how beautiful it all is, I just knew that I had to invite you for a conversation here on the podcast, and I'm really pleased that you accepted.
Thank you. It was a beautiful weekend we had together.
It was, and you made such a lovely reel afterwards. It's on your Instagram account, which I'm sure we'll direct people to at the end. But yeah, it really captured the essence of the spring retreat. It was stunning. So tell us a little bit about you, who Rosie is, and what your business is, what your work is.
So I'm Rosie. I co-founded Wild Ivy Retreats about 3-4 years ago with a really good friend of mine, Caroline. And we were basically creating a space to call in community. I think we felt like we were seeking. And Wild Ivy Retreats is really a space created to take people out into nature, to connect with nature. So through food, foraging, meditation, making, and physically being out in nature, we help people connect back to themselves ultimately.
Mm. And it's really traditional ways of connecting, isn't it? As you said that.
Mm.
And one moment on your retreat, we were sitting in the circle right at the start, making bracelets out of dandelion stalks, and it was just such a natural thing to do together, and so simple. But yeah, and I love the community aspect as well. I think that's so important. I think that's what a lot of us are seeking, aren't we? And in life at the moment, when we feel quite disconnected and alone often, and you can't really connect over social media in the same way as in person. So yeah, that's lovely to know that's what brought you here. So yeah, what was your path to get to this point then, to Wild Ivy Retreats and the business you have now? What led you here? What were the steps?
So I think it Wild Ivy started from this. It was a post-COVID seeking of community and connection. I think it was became really apparent during that time, um, for me personally, how I was lacking that community. So it started trying to create a space that I was seeking. But the journey for me actually started a few years before the beginning of Wild Ivy, where when I came out of uni, or throughout my uni experience, I had a festival shop. So I think I've always pushed against a bit um, the traditional working life. It kind of never really aligned with me. I did work in telesales for a bit, which didn't align with me, definitely didn't align with me, the
That's
corporate world.
exactly where I started. I started in call centers for a bank, just on the phone all day, and yeah, just didn't. I can't spend the rest of my life here.
No, yeah, and I was doing these music festivals, and it was amazing. I was outside, I was surrounded by all these, you know, expressive people who were really living their passion, and I was so inspired by that, and how each each weekend we would create these communities of people, and there was no um, people weren't fighting for business against each other. We were all there to support each other, and it kind of planted an idea in my head that this community can exist outside just festivals. It can exist in everyday life. And I do henna tattoos, and as I was having a one-on-one conversation with these people, I noticed something was happening with our energy, that they were opening up to me, talking to me, and when they walked away, they felt lighter. And I realized it wasn't really about me. I realized I had this skill in listening that I think I didn't realize I had before, and the importance of that listening. And I wanted to delve into that a little bit more. So that led me to Guatemala, into a space holding course, and through lots of twists and turns led me back to the UK to start Wild Ivy and sort of bring in all that knowledge that I had into an offering.
Wow, so quite the journey you went on to come back to us. I'm so pleased you came back to the UK and and brought your learnings here. What was the space holding course? Tell us about that in Guatemala. What was that experience like?
So it was incredible. It was a real adventure. I think to get there, we had to take a flight, three buses, a boat, and a tuk-tuk, and we ended up at on this road, this path. And the guy said, "Yeah, you just go down that, just go through those trees down there." And I was like, "No, no, no, please, can you take me to this address?" She went, "Yeah, yeah, you're here." So after about 2 days of traveling, the rucksack, I went down this little path and stayed in this beautiful eco retreat space with a company called Cooler Collective, and I learnt the art of space holding and ceremony. And it was really interesting in that retreat. When I first arrived, I had big imposter syndrome because this was right at the beginning of my journey in this space, and I was surrounded by a lot of people that had been there and had been working as yoga teachers, as space holders for a really long time. Um, And I remember the woman saying to me, "You are all here for a reason. You're all here at the right time." Um, and it was incredible. We learned how to work with the elements. It was based in Central South America. So a lot of the songs we were learning were in Spanish, these old medicine songs, which was incredible, humbling experience. And I think when I came back to the UK, I wanted to take with me my learnings. I wanted to make it really resonate with me, and my lineage and where I grew up, which is kind of how I found foraging and deepened my connection with nature through that journey of self-discovery after this experience I had in Guatemala.
Yeah. So what did you learn there then about the folklore and the lineage and the foraging? What was that journey like for you? Because that's what I could really sense in the retreat that I attended with you. It felt like it was returning to nature and earth, and it was, yeah, really something very different for me, a really different experience, but you really wove that into every part of the retreat.
Thank you. So I think after coming back from traveling, that's when we went into lockdown, and I had a lot of time just to be, which initially felt quite confronting actually. And I felt like I could start to, in that space of stillness, I learned to listen to the gentle nudges of nature and allow myself to be guided by that, and realizing that I'm just such a small part of something much, much bigger, and letting the kind of wisdom of nature guide me. So I started to learn about moon cycles, learn a little bit deeper about the seasons, and how to use that to influence what I do, and my own personal practices. And also, when I was in Guatemala, I learned a lot about working with elements, which is something about, especially what I do now, being outside, I've learned and been humbled by by working with outside. And the first ever retreat I did was in the height of summer, and I planned this whole day to be outside, to be with flowers, um, kind of, yeah, being outside the whole day. And then we had orange weather warnings of torrential rain, thunderstorms.
Mm.
It was a real, to start with, we were thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? We're going to have to change everything. And it was such an amazing lesson to learn to flow and to hear, perhaps in the middle of summer, it's actually really important for people to step inside. And rather than, working with the energy of summer, which is all outward, flourishing, bursting with life, perhaps actually the people coming to the retreat might be seeking stillness and just a day to step inside to refill their cup so that they can step out and be this kind of full summery self. And it was that first retreat I learned that lesson. Um, so
Wow.
going forward, we always let what's happening in nature really inform the day, but also our participants that are coming in, having an opening circle to share what brought you here today and what's your intention for the day, because we want to make sure we all align because we're a community.
Gosh, we are at the mercy of nature, aren't we? It's the one thing that we can't control. And I think perhaps in life we feel like a false sense of control that we have over things when we feel very ordered and we have our technology and we're surrounded by everything we want in our homes. But then we step outside of the home and immerse ourselves in nature, like on one of your retreat days. And yeah, you just have to go with the flow and learn important lessons along the way.
Absolutely. And I think also working with nature can be really, there is this element of we're not in control, but there's also a sort of a deeply grounding part of it. I find that you can completely rely on nature in terms of every single day the sun rises and the sun sets. And there's something really grounding in knowing that every day the sun will set and we can start again. Or in autumn, you know that the leaves will turn and they'll fall. and then something new will grow from that in spring. And
Mm.
having that really helped me personally, and I think sharing that knowledge with others in these retreats, I think, helps ground people in, oh, I'm here now.
Mm.
Rely on that when there's chaos and things around us we can't control. I can ground myself in the knowledge that the sun will rise again.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that. It's the simple things that we've lost touch with and lost knowledge about. And our ancestors were so in tune, weren't they, with nature and the rhythms and living their life by the sun and the moon and the seasons. And my mind just went to something quite random, but I remember walking around Pompeii in Italy, and how they talked about how they knew that the volcano was going to happen, and they sensed it, and the animals sensed it, and the people sensed it, and took as much action as they could. Most people couldn't save themselves still, but they had that intuition with nature, that alignment with it. And yeah, we really don't have that, do we? I mean, we're shocked by the weather now. It's like, oh, it's suddenly raining, and we're just shocked that that would happen, and then we're upset by it, and we take it personally, almost, that our plans have been ruined. We don't tend to go with the flow with everything that nature brings, which is in a cycle, like you say, and it all needs to happen, and it's quite understandable, all of it, but we seem to fight against it quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think the signs are almost always there. Nature is talking to us all the time, but because in the way our society is created, we're so busy, all our time is filled constantly, and even the sort of quiet moments we have, our downtime is looking at our phones or watching TV, or we never pause and create the space to listen. And whether that's to nature or whether that's even to ourselves, like, you know people going through burnout or doing things that don't align with them, and we don't make space to pause and listen to our bodies that are saying, stop, this isn't right. I have a feeling in my body that my intuition is tapping in, something's not right, and we don't create the space to listen to the words.
Mm.
What I try do and try and practice within myself, like, I'm not perfect, but something I try and practice in myself is really making that space to listen to myself as well.
So listening to others and having that space where we can come together, like, say, community, and have that listening space. But yeah, listening to our inner voice as well, and the difference that that can make. And what journey do you see people going on when they make that change? Like, what's the impact it can have for people when they really start to listen properly, and they're not just distracted and busy minded all the time?
I think people will be surprised at what comes up, and I think there's a lot of what we do in everyday life becomes a habit that we don't think about. So we're doing all these things, and if we stop and pause and think, um, what's the initial intention behind these things? What's driving us? Is it ourselves, or is it someone else, or is it an idea of ourselves that we've created that might not be true, it might not be aligned? And I think when you start listening, it can be a bit scary, it can be a bit confronting, but ultimately, it will lead you to the self, to doing something that really lights you up, and you're passionate about. I think when we were on the retreat, you spoke about how, the bracelets,
Mm.
and how we started off with the bracelet making, and the intention behind that was, dandelions have a big folklore around wishing. So we asked each person that came, to make the bracelet. But you said that you had, in the morning, you heard the words, don't wear
Yeah,
bracelets.
it was really bizarre, really bizarre. I was getting ready for the morning for the retreat, getting dressed and thinking, what should I wear? And I thought, I'll put on a nice bracelet. I've got so many bracelets at home, and I just wanted to choose one that matched my outfit, like you do. And I must have put on 10 different bracelets, and none of them looked right or felt right. And it was really annoying me. It was like frustrating. And I thought, what's going on? Why can't I choose a bracelet? It's driving me crazy. And then I heard a voice saying, you're not going to wear a bracelet today, and you'll find out why later. Just trust. You don't need a bracelet. And I was like, what could that possibly mean? I just didn't understand it, but I thought I'm going to listen because I haven't got time now to stand here trying on all my bracelets. And then we sat down, and that was the first activity after we'd had our dandelion coffee, which I'm still drinking daily, and I love it. And you handed out these lovely dried, very long dandelion stems and showed us how to do this intricate bracelet weaving. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is it. This is why here I am with my bare wrist, ready to properly focus on this new bracelet, this very special one. It was a wishing bracelet, wasn't it? And that was really interesting that should happen. And I think we had more conversations, didn't we, on the day, and about times in life when that voice comes in, and it can be quite loud and tells you to do something, or a word or something, and you just feel kind of a nudge to follow it, and you don't always know why, but if you follow it, it can be quite magical, and it all sounds very woo-woo, and it hasn't got a kind of, I guess, we can't kind of lay this down as a plan of this is what you do, always listen to the voice and follow it, because it may not be there. And I guess that's what could be quite hard for people to grasp, I guess, with this kind of way of working with your inner voice and your intuition. And how can people start to plug into it, or start listening to it and be open?
Well, I think this example is a really beautiful physical example of how listening to the voice can create space for something to come in. So you heard the voice, create space on your wrist, leave it blank, and then it was filled by something with intention. It's like a really that's kind of a beautiful story that shows physically what can happen. I think so how can people start doing this kind of work? It's hard. I think it's something you have to kind of feel into. And it can start off by these smaller things, and it can lead to bigger decisions. I think it's allowing yourself to live in wonder, and to slip into that wonder and that sort of almost childlike open eyes looking at the world. And I think we tell ourselves these stories, and we can be quite stuck in these bubbles. And a kind of beautiful practice I try and do is, say, for example, if I miss a bus or I miss a train, I have to get a later train, rather than thinking, oh my God, that's so annoying, I'm late, or I missed that train, I think, okay, this is an opportunity. And sort of rewiring your mindset to thinking this could be an opportunity for something exciting. Who knows what could happen? This is out of my control. But the thing I can control is my wonder at the situation. So maybe I'll meet someone, maybe I'll find something, maybe I'll see something, and that will guide me. I think it's just having your eyes open to things.
Yeah, I can feel that. And it's not a state that many of us are in very often, that state of awe and wonderment, because life doesn't really give space for that often, or inspiration for that. We're often just in our daily routine and doing our job, and then sitting down and watching Netflix or whatever it is we do in our evening, and like, where's the wonder and the awe? And I think that's where, for me, I know on that day, spending time in nature, and it was true nature. It wasn't just like the kind of nature I go to outside my front door when I want a quick walk and go to the nearest kind of field or something. We were walking through meadows for hours among the most beautiful wildflowers and the most ancient trees, and it was real wonder and awe just being in nature.
I think when I first started this work, I first started, I went to this is before I went to Guatemala, I went to my first women's circle, and we did this meditation. It was all about finding our inner wise woman. And I think I was so disconnected from myself and my inner wisdom. That's what I was seeking, this kind of looking for this inner wisdom. And part of the guided meditation was to meet our inner wise woman. And in the sharing circle, I described this older woman, and she was really wise. She didn't say anything to me. She just touched my head and her head and my heart. And I told the story, and then at the end, this woman came up to me and said, "Excuse me, I think you saw yourself. I think you saw yourself. The way you described the person you saw, I saw you." And I just thought it was really interesting. This was right at the beginning of my journey, and I was so disconnected from myself and my inner wisdom that I couldn't even see when I met her that it was me.
Mm.
For me, that really triggered a chain reaction of listening and here understanding what's happening in my body and the reactions I'm having in situations, and knowing if it's a positive or a negative. Because I think sometimes we can react from a place of fear rather than intuition. So I'm not going to do that because my intuition is saying I shouldn't do that. But is it intuition or is it fear coming up? And if it's fear, maybe that's something you should push through and explore. Why is fear coming up? And I think starting this work and getting into the rhythm of understanding your body and your reactions to things can really help guide you.
You're right there. I think a lot of us operate from fear a lot of the time. You know, it can almost be our default setting to be fearful and suspicious and worrying and anxious about everything and anything. And how can we discern the difference then between this is fear-based intuition with air quotes, and real gut intuition? You know, how can we tell when fear is present?
I think it comes down to where you're feeling these emotions in your body. So how body language, so if you feel it in your chest, in your stomach, and your body's having a reaction, I think that's fear triggers that in our bodies. Whereas if it's an intuition, it's more of a whisper. It's more of just a deep inner knowing. It's from a calm space. It's a deep inner knowing of this isn't right.
So, Rosie, are there some simple things that people can do to nurture this, like that listening to their intuition, but also how to stay mindful and intentional?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I do lots of workshops with different people, and everyone always says, I know I should be meditating and I know I should be doing this, but I just don't have space. And I think it's because we are shared this image of what it looks like to listen to your inner voice, to meditate, to find stillness. And often it's not relatable. We think it's other, someone else can do that, I can't do that. But I really believe that meditation and these practices is finding a way to be in your body present, and working into your schedule, because your schedule is completely different to mine and completely different to everyone else's, and sometimes meditating for half an hour, 20 minutes just isn't practical. So I find it's best to find things where you're completely present in your body and to work it into your routine. And I always say about making a cup of tea, because everyone, that's a break for a lot of people. Go make a cup of tea if you're at work, if you're at home. And in that 3, 4, 5 minutes, just be really present in making that tea. So wait for the kettle to boil, listen to the kettle boiling. You pick the cup, and pick a cup that you think's beautiful, that speaks to you. And then you check in, what do I fancy? Do I want a builder's tea? Do I want a herbal tea? Do I want a coffee? You're checking in with yourself in that moment. And then as you make and stir the coffee, you can just be there watching, smelling, present. And it's something we do just mindlessly. If you just bring a little bit of intention into, say, that, it can really change your day. And it doesn't have to be a cup of tea. It can be different things. It can be going for a walk. It could be going for a run. if we do it with a little bit of intention, it can help us just step outside of ourselves for a second, and be present. And it's when we do this, when we step outside ourselves and we find this presence, is when we can um, listen to ourselves and listen to what we need. Because really, that's what your inner voice is. It's listening to yourself, which we so rarely do.
Yeah, giving opportunity for that is so funny. Here's another little coincidence, Rosie. Just before we came online, and I was rushing around a bit because I've got a really busy day, and I realized I wanted to look at the notes you'd sent me and what we were going to talk about again. I was like busy up in my head, and I thought, actually, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea before. And I picked my mug, and I chose one of the tea bags that I made, the tea blends in the little paper tea bags that I made at the retreat with you. And I did take my time because I had two left, and I kind of was looking at which flowers and leaves were in there and smelling them. And I was pouring water in and then seeing the colours come through the paper tea bag. And I was just noticing all the and the smell of the tea and the herbs coming forward. And I realised this has given me a moment of peace in this really busy day. I'm loving making this cup of tea, and I'm going to have it with me then throughout the conversation with Rosie. And that's going to be lovely because it's going to give me that thread of mindfulness as I speak to Rosie. So there you go, it works.
Wow, that's gorgeous. Yeah, and it's such a simple thing to do. Um, and yeah, and lots of people I've spoken to have said, yeah, that really helps. And taking a conscious breath, one conscious breath of breathing all day long. We're busy, we're doing all this stuff, but if we can just be present for a moment and take 2 deep breaths, it can change what you're doing, because you're regulating the somatics of your body. So you're aligning your body with your mind. And then in that moment, we can react from a more centered place in whatever situation we're in.
They're all very everyday things to do, very accessible, don't require us going to a weekly meditation class or downloading an app or anything. It's things that we can incorporate into our daily routine, that mindfulness. And the word that was just coming forward as I was thinking about reconnecting with ourselves and listening and allowing that is trust. Like, do I trust myself? Do I trust myself to be kind of the guidance on my path in life? Because that's a lot of what we talk about in these podcast episodes, is like following your path. And you really did follow your path, didn't you, with your festival little nudge, and then you traveled and you learned, and you had mentors and people that said things along the way that pushed you towards where you are now or guided you towards it. But yeah, trust can be a big part of it, can't it? That, do I really trust myself to know what's best for myself, especially if that's been trained out of us along the way through school and parents and society, that we can't really follow a different path or listen to our inner nudges. How do we overcome that, that kind of conditioning?
Yeah, well, I think there are so many amazing voices in this space that sometimes it can feel overwhelming, that I've felt I don't want to add to the noise, because what do I know? What can I add? And through doing my women's circle, or the retreats in these circles, what I found is that each person has their own wisdom and their own magic to share. And I think it's beautiful creating spaces where lots of people from all different backgrounds, with different upbringings and different ages, especially ages. It's quite rare you find a group of people where there's no hierarchy. There's no one that's a mother, there's no one that's your boss or your daughter, or we're all equal and sharing our wisdom at these different points of life. And trusting that something you say can have a ripple effect on someone else you might not know. So, for example, I just mentioned about the tea, and then there was that synchronicity there. And that can happen. That can happen in everyday life.
I think when we step outside of our usual social circles as well, usual family, social circles, work, colleagues, all the same people that we spend time with, which of course some of those will be amazing people that we have chosen and that do inspire us, but a lot of it's the same old, isn't it? Especially for work maybe, and so on. But yeah, I know that was a powerful part of the day that I spent with you, was being with this very varied group. I think, I don't know what the youngest age was. I think maybe about 20, or a bit older than 20, I'm not sure. And then there was a woman who was in her 80s, I think, and everything in between. And I found myself speaking to everyone at different ages, and it was wonderful because I wouldn't usually always speak to all the kinds of people that were there and all the age groups, and everyone there for a different reason and bringing their own story and really sharing it all. I mean, you facilitated that beautifully right from the start, where everyone had a chance to speak and share why they were there. And I do remember someone mentioning awe and wonder, and they were the reasons they were there, and return retreaters as well, who knew that this is what they need. So yeah, having that opportunity to connect with people opens your mind to other ways of living and other ways of being, and gets us out of the rut, doesn't it, of same old routine, and opens your mind to actually perhaps I can do things a little bit differently.
And I think it's active listening as
Mm.
well. We don't do that very often. I don't come across it all that often where you're having a conversation where you're not thinking about um, what the next thing you're going to say is. It's quite rare to really like tune in, listen to exactly what they're saying, and then react and react. It's kind of, it seems very simple, but often when you're having a conversation, you're thinking about what am I going to say next? Oh, actually, I want to. Oh, can I just butt in because I've got this thing I really want to tell you? And it's not always from a bad place; it can be from an excitable place. Um, but actively listening, reflecting back what you've heard, and then sharing your experience can really lead to these sort of deeper, more meaningful conversations and connections.
Mm. Absolutely. I'm imagining as you're talking about that, the ripple effects of the work that you do. You gather together these groups of people, very diverse, as we just said, all there for different reasons, and allowing them to reconnect and have that space and be in nature and go through certain rituals. And, it's just beautiful. And then imagine the ripple effect afterwards, because everyone takes that home, everyone shares it with their own community, their family, their partner, whoever. And yeah, the positive impact that will have. And I've told so many people about the day already, and we're here talking about it as well. But I went out for a foraging walk with a friend at the weekend, and she told me that her blood pressure was a little high, and I said, let's find you some hawthorn flowers, and we were picking hawthorn flowers, and now she's gone home to make tea. And yeah, it's phenomenal the work you're doing, Rosie, and I'm so pleased that you followed your path and and are bringing this to the world. And it seems like such a simple thing to do, to be out in
It
nature and
is,
to
it is
connect.
simple.
Very simple, but you facilitate it in a beautiful way that I know has got a lot of learning and experience and careful thought from you that's created these spaces. And then it has a phenomenal effect. There's a lot of energy in a very simple thing to do in the middle, and then a lot of output, if you like, a lot of benefits out there for everyone who's benefiting. So thank you for bringing that. What's next for Wild Ivy Retreats? What's on your calendar and coming up?
So I'm doing a lot of work with in kind of events and going into businesses, hosting baby showers or baby blessings. It's kind of a real beautiful, or when the mother's pregnant, holding space for the mothers as they transition into motherhood, bridal blessings, birthday parties. And then I also host seasonal events. So each season we have a different retreat that's celebrating whatever's happening at that point in time. And it's interesting what you were saying before about what people take away, because I think something we have in common is I always say that I'm planting seeds of hope. And I think you said previously about planting seeds of inspiration. I think
Mm,
you can, when you're doing this kind of facilitation role, you can give people the seeds and you can say, this is how you could nurture it. but they have to go away and they have to remember to keep showing up and keep watering and working on the soil and the foundation so that plant can grow strong roots. And then the flower that grows is beautiful, but it's different for everybody.
Yeah. You allow the growth then, don't you, for each individual? And there is so much power in the seed. I know just from speaking to nutritionists as well, they're like, seeds are the most nutrient dense foods because there's so much within them. And yet in my work with tapping as well, using EFT tapping, and we use different words and phrases as we tap. And some of the most powerful phrases and words to do, I call them seeding phrases. So we're not just only, acknowledging the negative that we feel and maybe thinking about how we'd like to feel, but then I just use phrases such as, I wonder if I could release this. I wonder what else is possible for me. How else could I look at this? And they're these kind of open-ended questions that we use as we tap that just allow then someone to create their own true reality, and bring out their own inner wisdom and inner guidance. And I think that's often all we need. We need the right conditions, the time, the space, the permission from ourselves to do it. And we have all the answers within us, don't we? We're the best kind of authors of our own life, aren't we? We know best where we want to go and what's right for us. But it's sometimes hard to recognize it when we're so busy and so overwhelmed.
And I think if you imagine it like a garden, you're planting lots of seeds. Not all of the seeds grow, but some of them will.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of it. You just have to plant. You have to plant the seeds. You have a starting point, like a ripple or a seed starts, and then whatever happens as it grows. Sometimes you don't have control, but it can turn into something beautiful.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Rosie. I have one question that I ask everybody who comes onto my podcast, and I'd love to hear your answer. What is it that brings you joy?
I believe it's connection. So connection with self, with others, connection with nature, making, creating. It's all there's all different things, but it always comes back to connection.
I love that. I feel we've come full circle, because that's what you talked about at the start, the community connection and why Wild Ivy exists. So wonderful. Thank you so much. How can people find out more about all your beautiful offerings and stay in touch with you online? Where can we find you?
So I am wildivyretreats.com, and that's across my website, across Instagram and also Facebook. So yeah, and on my Instagram, I'm always updating the events I'm doing, and hopefully sort of adding in a little bit of nature and a few deep breaths onto your Instagram feed.
Can I just say, your Instagram account is one of the most beautiful places to spend time. And I went there just before we spoke and just had a little browse through and found myself just watching a few reels on repeat with beautiful images of flowers and poetry and sounds of nature, and it's just gorgeous. So yes, if you're needing a little mini retreat in your busy day, just pop over to Rosie's Instagram at Wild Ivy Retreats, and you'll instantly be transported to a beautiful place. So thank you for sharing all of that and all you do. It's been really lovely to speak to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely.
Thank you for listening to the Fertile Mindset podcast. Please rate and review, and remember to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Now, if this conversation has sparked something within you and you want to live your life with clarity, purpose, and joy, then I would love you to sign up for my daily seeds emails. They're delivered to you each day, giving you messages of support and planting seeds of inspiration. You'll also receive welcome gifts from me, including an EFT tuition video and some of my favourite tapping exercises to clear overwhelm, reduce stress, help you focus, and more, all completely free of charge. I'll also keep in touch with you about upcoming events and support that I think you'll like. Go to fertilemindset.com/daily seeds to sign up. And I'll see you again next week for another episode of the Fertile Mindset podcast.